I think the expectation that we should feel complete nothingness or indifference for every single ex we've ever had is not realistic for all of us.
I got a glitch. Oh, it just
Hello everyone and welcome back. It's Ash, your truth-bombing fairy godmother for everything love, dating, and relationships. Today's video is going to be about a highly requested yet also slightly controversial and taboo topic, which is the subject of being in a relationship with someone yet still having some type of feelings or thoughts about an ex-partner. I have had so many of you request this video, and when I was doing my keyword research this week to see what types of topics and words people were searching for on YouTube, I was really surprised to see how highly searched this topic was. So of course, I thought it would be a great topic to talk about and dissect and explore, and there's a lot that I have to say. But first, if you think you could benefit from new love, dating, relationship, or just more general life advice videos every single week, then I highly suggest subscribing to my channel by tapping that button below. We have such an amazing community here, and I would love nothing more than to see it continue to grow. Okay, so firstly, I'm just gonna start out by simply reassuring and validating you. Whether or not people are willing to admit it, thinking about an ex or having curiosity about an ex or even having some type of emotions or feelings towards an ex while also in a loving, happy relationship with someone else is actually extremely normal and common. And I realize that that might be a little bit controversial, but please hear me out and allow me to elaborate more. Still wanting to be with an ex versus still thinking about them or having some type of emotional fondness or attraction towards them are two very different things. And just because you are still thinking about an ex or still have some type of emotional attachment towards them does not necessarily mean that you still want to be with them. In fact, I think that is very rarely the case. However, if on the rare chance you recognize that you for sure still absolutely do want to be with your ex, yet you're in a relationship with someone else, then I really encourage you to do some self-exploration there, perhaps talk it over with a professional, and decide whether or not being in a relationship with someone else is the right thing or the fair thing to be doing at this point in time. But back to the difference between thinking about or having an emotional attachment with an ex versus actually wanting to be with them. This is something I've talked about a lot in some of my previous videos, specifically this one up here about the difference between wanting to be with an ex versus wanting to be like an ex. And this is an experience I think a lot of us confuse and struggle to identify the difference between. Most of the time, when we remain stuck on an ex or still have some type of lingering thoughts and feelings about them long after we have split and even moved on, those lingering thoughts and feelings have very little to do with your actual ex and much more to do with what they represent for you. So for example, your ex could represent a lot of the qualities or attributes that you really want to have within yourself. So you stay hung up on them because it's basically your psyche's way of calling your attention to those things that your soul craves and really wants to cultivate within itself. Or your ex can also represent a wound that was triggered as a result of that relationship ending or that person leaving, which is also something that I've explored in this video up here about abandonment wounds. So that pull that you're feeling towards your ex is another way that you're being called to heal and tend to some wounding that needs your attention. So again, it's about what they represent and much less about them as an individual. So what I'm essentially saying here is that the reasons we might continue to think about or continue to feel some type of way towards an ex shouldn't be taken literally or at face value. Humans are extremely complex, and just because we continue thinking about someone or still feeling certain emotions towards someone from our past doesn't necessarily mean that we're still in love with them or that we need or want to get back together with them. And this concept of not taking things at face value is something that Cheryl Paul, an absolutely amazing counselor and someone I was actually taught and led by in a variety of courses that I participated in over the years for my own anxiety, really focuses on in her own work. And I wanted to share some chunks from an article that she wrote about this exact topic, which is called "It's Not What You Think." And she says, one of the many problems of living in an image-based, superficial culture is that we learn to take life at face value. You have a dream about having sex with someone other than your partner, and you latch onto the most obvious interpretation that you secretly want to have sex with someone else. You find yourself obsessively thinking about your ex, and you assume it means that you still want to be with him or her. You bolt awake in the middle of the night with unexpected doubt about whether you love your partner enough, and you assume that you don't love your partner enough. These seem like reasonable enough interpretations, and they're certainly supported by the mainstream culture. By contrast, part of the reason that people respond to my work with a breath of relief is that I take very little at face value. True to the perspective by which I've been trained, I understand sex dreams as symbols that you're longing to unite with an underdeveloped part of you that the dream figure represents. I understand intrusive thoughts about an ex as an indicator that you're needing closure with that person or a part of you represented by that person. I understand doubt as a sign that you're a highly intelligent, sensitive person who needs more information about real love and takes the commitment of marriage very seriously. My point is that I rarely interpret life by what we see on the surface. And in fact, neuroscience has now proved what depth psychologists and mystics have intuited for centuries. The conscious mind runs the show at best only about 5% of the time. She then goes into a lot more detail about this in the article, but she finishes it up by saying, feelings are not always what we think they are. Longings point to worlds upon worlds of inner needs. When we learn to interpret symptoms as metaphors that stand for deeper needs and longings, the kaleidoscopic, multidimensional, timeless world of the unconscious opens up to us. We become adept at digging deep and ultimately at taking full responsibility for our inner realms. Life becomes less simplistic, but a lot more interesting and perhaps, paradoxically, less scary. For when we're tapped into the underground river of the unconscious instead of living on the surface, we're living life from the place of essence instead of image. And as always, I will link the full article in the description box down below. But basically, in a really beautiful, poetic way, Cheryl is essentially saying that humans are really complex and having thoughts or feelings about an ex is very rarely what it may seem like on the surface. And in addition to some of those alternate explanations that I discussed before, such as having an ex who embodies qualities or attributes that your soul really craves for itself, or having an ex that represents a deeper, unhealed wound, something else that Cheryl also touched on is the concept of perhaps needing more closure with an ex. And this is something that I want to explore a little bit more. The concept of needing or getting closure with an ex is something that I think is highly misunderstood, because closure is not something that someone else can give you. They can certainly help aid in that process of finding closure within yourself, and it's fantastic if we are lucky enough to have an ex who is willing to help and participate in that process. But that simply isn't always the case. And the reason I think pointing that out is important is because I know so many of us remain stuck on this idea that if we could just get closure from an ex, that then we will be able to move on. And that just simply isn't true. However, I will say that if you truly feel like having some type of clearing or healing conversation with an ex could be beneficial to you and your current partner, and you're in the type of safe, loving, trusting, secure relationship that is required in order to be able to have a conversation like that with an ex, then I do think that that is something that could be worth exploring. And just to open up about my personal life, this is something that I actually did about a year or so into my relationship with my now fiance. I didn't have a nasty breakup or anything like that with my ex, but just due to a variety of circumstances, we went from this really weird on again, off again situationship, friends with benefits type of situation, to just kind of never speaking to each other again or having any type of final conversation or goodbye, which was just really odd for me because he was someone that had a huge impact on my life, for better and for worse. Oh, I'm sorry guys, I had to turn on the aircon, so for the rest of this video you might hear a bit of a buzzing in the background, but I can't do it, a bitch is hot. But anyway, with very open, honest communication with my partner, where I clearly stated my intention for wanting to reach out to my ex and what I hoped to achieve and what I thought it could do for me emotionally, I was able to reach out to my ex and have a very healing conversation and exchange with him, which I was really thankful for and happy that I was in a position to be able to do that. However, was it ultimately needed? In hindsight, I'm not sure that it was. I'm not sure there was anything that was said in that conversation that I couldn't have provided for myself. If you are in a position to be able to have a closure type of conversation with an ex, then great, perhaps that's an option worth exploring with your partner. But if not, then that's totally fine too. Closure is something that you can give yourself. And if you're interested in learning more about that or what that can look like, please let me know and perhaps I can do a whole separate video on that topic alone. Now, let's say we have ruled out all other alternative explanations for why we might be thinking about or feeling a certain way about an ex, such as what they might represent for us, etc. Let's say you are having actual legitimate feelings or care about an ex, yet are in a relationship with someone else. And this is also an experience I have discussed in a previous video, so feel free to check that one out up here. But in my opinion, we can absolutely have a level of love or care or attraction towards an ex or someone from our past while still being completely happy and in love and fulfilled in our current relationship. The most obvious and perfect example of this being widowers. I think the expectation that we should feel complete nothingness or indifference for every single ex we've ever had is not realistic for all of us. Certain people leave certain imprints on our hearts, and that's okay. It's not wrong or unhealthy, and it doesn't mean that you can't or don't fully love someone else. Your love, respect, and appreciation for your ex or someone from your past doesn't have to take away from your love, respect, and appreciation for your current partner. They can coexist within you at the same time. But does that mean that you should feed energy into those feelings towards an ex? No. And I think that's where a very hard boundary needs to exist. If you recognize that for whatever reason you have an ex that triggers something within you, then I think out of respect for your current partner, you should not maintain any type of relationship with that ex. I don't see any benefit in continuing to leave any type of portal to that old flame open. And I think in this case, you do have to simply learn how to love and appreciate from afar. But back to the subject of unrealistic expectations. When we lose a close friendship for some reason, and this might be a dumb argument, maybe I'm missing something, I don't know. But for some reason, there isn't that same level of societal pressure and expectations that we just feel complete nothingness or indifference towards that old friend or that lost relationship. It seems to be much more accepted that the emotional experience of missing an old friend doesn't at all take away from the bond and love that we have with other friends. And I'm just not sure why there's such a different set of rules or expectations for our romantic relationships. For example, and this is something I've mentioned plenty of times, but I no longer have a relationship with one of my closest childhood friends. And I really miss her, and I probably always will, but I also recognize that we likely cannot and will not have a friendship again. And I also have several really, really incredible friends in my life now. And my emotional attachment towards my childhood friend does not in any way impact or inhibit the love that I have for the friends in my life currently. So in essence, in addition to everything else that we've explored in this video, I think at a really basic level, we need to reframe our mentalities and think more realistically about these really nonsensical judgments and expectations that society places on us in terms of what feelings we should or shouldn't have. It's okay to continue to allow yourself to miss and care and appreciate someone for who they were or are in the time that you shared together. And doing so does not have to take away from what you have with your current partner. Our hearts can do both, and that's more than okay. Okay, my loves, I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I feel like this video is getting really long, and this is a really complex subject with lots of different avenues to go down and explore. If this is something that you would like me to talk about more, or if you want me to further elaborate on a certain part that I've touched on, or perhaps something that I didn't even touch on at all, please let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. You guys always have such interesting, insightful perspectives to share. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week.
Tell me what was in that stuff you gave me. I think I like it. In fact, it made me high.